Good morning. Welcome to Crime Daily. I'm Amanpreet and
I'm Nicole.
today we are going to introduce you to the controversial case of Sacco and Vanzetti.
So Nicola Sacco was a shoemaker and Bartolomeo
Yes.
Vanzetti was a fish seller. He left Italy for the U.S. in 1908 and believed followers of Luigi Galliani, an Italian anarchist, advocated the revolutionary violence.
All right. So now we move on to the actual murder. Now that you have the background of Sacco and Vanzetti, on April 15th, 1920, 7 years ago, two men approached Frederick Parmenter, an unarmed paymaster, and Alessandro Berardelli, a security guard, as they were transporting two Slater Morrill Shoe Company payroll boxes from Pearl Street, Braintree, in Massachusetts to the main factory.
Berardelli shot multiple times and he reached for his gun. He dropped his gun when he fell. Robbers stole the boxes and escaped into the waiting getaway car.
Blick.
Firing at the company workers.
There had been an earlier shoe factory robbery in Bridgewater on December 24th, 1919, which is Christmas Eve. Gallianus
Ferruccio
Cochi
was ordered to be deported.
He was a suspect for the two murders, but there was no evidence found. Cochi's housemate, Mike Boda, also known as Mario Buda, his car was suspected to be the second getaway car because there were tracks found near the abandoned first car that the two murderers used to get away.
Cochi arrived at Johnson's garage where he was impounded. Impounded cars were held with Sacco, Vanzetti, and Richard Orciani. The police alerted Buda escaped with
Orciani, and they weren't seen until 1928 in Italy. Sacco and Vanzetti were arrested before the Bridgewater trial.
So then the Bridgewater trial. Only Vanzetti tried for attempted Bridgewater robbery murder. Others had alibis. Example was Sacco's time card.
So Judge Webster Thayer, he was an anti-anarchist, and the trial began on June 22nd in 1920. There were Italian witnesses, but they were poorly understood, either through an interpreter or poor English.
Vanzetti chose not to testify, according to lawyer John P. Vahey. Evidence included shotgun shells found at crime scene on Vanzetti.
On July 1st, 1927, Thayer delivered the verdict that Vanzetti was guilty of both a murder and robbery. But before sentencing, Thayer discovers that the jury had tampered with the shells, so they were prejudiced. So Vanzetti was sentenced to only 12 to 15 years in prison for only the robbery.
The Dedham trial. Evidence. Sacco was absent from work on the day of the murder. Vanzetti was seen in the getaway car, and Sacco was seen at the shooting of Berardelli. The salesman says Sacco pointed a gun at him within the getaway car.
Vanzetti testified that he had been selling fish at the time, and he had witnesses, customers who actually saw him selling the fish. Sacco testified that he had been in Boston applying for a passport at the Italian consulate, and the employee he spoke with refused to go to the U.S. for the trial, but he lunched with friends in Boston while he was applying for the passport, and they did testify.
Sacco's cap was found at the crime scene, too small. The bullets found were identical in type and appearance to Sacco's and Vanzetti's guns. It was discovered that they had fled to Mexico in 1917 to avoid the draft.
Sacco and Vanzetti were found guilty and sentenced to electrocution. This resulted in protests in Italy, Latin America, and the American Embassy in Paris. The defense committee was headed by Vanzetti's friend Aldino Felisani and composed of anarchists to gather evidence for Sacco and Vanzetti. They gained support from social elitist Gardner Jackson.
In February 1924, guns were tested again with new technology. Someone had switched the barrels on Sacco's gun. Judge Thayer began his private hearings, which came up to no finding.
The first appeal to the Supreme Judicial Court was in 1926, but the verdict upheld Thayer's decision.
In November 1925, Celestino Medeiros, an ex-convict awaiting trial for murder, confesses to the Braintree murders and robbery.
These trace him to a gang in Providence, Rhode Island, with history of shoe factory robberies, led by Joe Morelli, who bore a striking resemblance to Sacco. But Judge Thayer again denied a new trial on October 23, 1926.
The Second Supreme Judicial Court appeal was on January 1927. Harvard law professor Felix Frankfurter published an article for the retrial in the Atlantic Monthly. The appeal was denied on April 5, 1927.
Which is this year.
Many famous socialists and intellectuals, Albert Einstein, Benito Mussolini, industrial workers of the world, and etc., protested for a retrial.
Sacco and Vanzetti during this time were being jailed in Charleston, and they believed they were innocent. And they were framed because they were anarchists and atheists.
On April 9th this year, Judge Thayer sentenced them to execution by electrocution. On April 15th, Sacco, Vanzetti, and Medeiros was executed by Robert Elliott. There was 3 shootings in Germany the next day.
Severino de Giovanni, an Italian anarchist, bombed the American embassy, possibly in response, and so were Thayer's house and Elliott's house, Elliott being the executor. Wells called this a Dreyfus case.
The Boston book printed and declared the ethnic problem and foreign criticism because of this. Then published Sacco and Vanzetti's corresponding letters.
So that was it for today's Crime Daily. Again, I'm Amanpreet.
And I'm Nicole.
And we'll see you next time.